Tired of dropping your phone or struggling to prop it up? Meet the PopSockets phone grip with expanding kickstand in black, your new must-have accessory. Don't miss out. Grab yours today. Click the link in the video description to shop now on Amazon.
I grew up in the shadow of Russia, where my mum was taught how to build guns. As child, I'm still scared living in the UK. It wasn't until Zelensky's disastrous meeting with Donald Trump a couple of weeks ago that the reality truly kicked in for Sun reporter Kate Kalnice. Ever since tyrant Putin brutally invaded Ukraine in 2022, she says she somehow managed to remain hopeful and had always been the one to reassure her parents in Latvia that the nightmare would soon come to an end. Sun reporter Kate Kalnice shares her story of growing up in the shadow of Russia and why she fears her homeland could be the next country in Vlad's sights. The shocking White House bust-up between President Trump and Zelensky last month, where the self-proclaimed dealmaker humiliated the wartime hero in front of millions, has made me more scared than ever. With tears streaming down my face, it finally dawned on me, if Putin, who's been gifting meat grinders to bereaved Russian mums, takes over Ukraine, my home, Latvia, could very well be the next on the dictator's list. The bloodthirsty tyrant, a former KGB officer, seized power in the Kremlin more than 25 years ago, and it seems that ever since it's been his mission to rebuild the pre-1917 Russian Empire. The vast empire, which was generally considered to be economically backwards, consisted of many now sovereign countries, including Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, as well as Latvia, where I was born in 1996. My friends and schoolmates born in the early 90s are the first generation to not live under the brutal Soviet hammer and sickle flag. I've heard dozens of horror stories from my mum about what it was really like to be a part of the USSR. And suddenly, the tension in the air feels like this could be where the Ukraine war is leading us. However, being a small nation of less than 2 million and having power-hungry Putin as our direct neighbor to the east has always left us with a palpable sense of fear and plenty of what-ifs. I've heard dozens of horror stories from my mum about what it was really like to be a part of the USSR. And suddenly, the tension in the air feels like this could be where the Ukraine war is leading us. The war is still raging on despite hopes of a ceasefire, with the port city of Odessa blitzed in a massive attack by Russia. Trump has assured he trusts that Putin wants to stop the fighting, but experts have warned his aggression will not stop there. Latvia may have gained independence and freedom from the Soviet state over 20 years ago, but the horrific memories and nightmares are something my mum, born in the early 60s, will never forget. One of the most bizarre facts I recall my mum sharing with me is being taught how to disassemble and assemble a Kalashnikov rifle as a pupil at school aged just 15. Every week, we had lessons, Russian propaganda, about the great achievements of the Soviet Union, and how miserable life in the West and the USA was. Young students, I was around 15 at the time, were demonstrated how to assemble an AK-47 and how to properly put a gas mask on our faces. Then they asked us to do it ourselves, my mum recalled, adding that these military lessons happened in Russian. All of this, she added, was to prepare the population for a potential war or conflict with the West, which was always portrayed as the ultimate symbol of evil. Even physical education was not so much orientated towards improving general health, but rather to make the school kids fit for work and protecting the country. Even more worryingly, it appears that the sick lesson still hasn't been eradicated from Russia's school program, more than 2 decades since the USSR collapsed in 1991. Several months after Putin had launched his bloody attack on Ukraine, distressing footage emerged on Telegram showing an officer in fatigues demonstrating how to use a Kalashnikov machine to nursery children. According to the post by Ostorozhno Novosti, Beware the News, the lesson was delivered by Pavel Fursov, a member of the pro-Kremlin Combat Brotherhood movement, the New York Post reported. The children from kindergarten number 31 were reminded of what qualities distinguish a true defender of the fatherland, the Post read. In the images released alongside the clip, the young kids can be seen standing around the weapons on a carpet while Fursov demonstrates their use with the help of a female teacher. Another horror video also showed a young Russian boy in army fatigues holding a gun and being told to kill King Ukrainians. Outside the school, where the pupils would be greeted by a huge statue of Lenin, the Soviet reality was even more dreary and harsh. In its nearly 70 years of existence, the Soviet Union witnessed tragic famines, regular food supply crises, and countless commodity shortages. Towards the second half of the 20th century, Soviet citizens, 285 million at its peak in 1989, were no longer starving to death in great numbers. However, the diet, my mum recalled, remained heavily reliant on potatoes and bread, and now seemingly basic commodities, such as fresh fruit, sugar, and meat, would grow scarce. Back then, my mum told me you were risking your life to get your hands on a few oranges, which were the ultimate gift millions of kids were hoping to get for Christmas. It may seem bizarre and something out of a dystopian movie, but the Soviet citizens had to know the person behind the till to buy imported fruit. Towards the end of the Soviet Union, when the brutal communist regime was nearing its fall, the economy was a total shambles and citizens paid the price. I will never forget the long queues outside the stores early in the morning just so you'd get what you needed. Sometimes some parents would have their kids with them, as that would get them inside quicker. It was also around this time the rationing cards were introduced, which meant every household was only allowed to purchase a set amount of items, including booze. Children were also entitled to a rationing card for alcohol. Alcohol, my mum added, was a huge problem back then. Its relatively low prices and the overall depressed mood amongst fed-up people meant alcohol misuse was on the rise. During her very early years, my mum, naturally, viewed the world through a child's lens. I was watching cartoons, movies about the brave Soviet military men, was collecting chewing gum wrappers someone had sent us from abroad, so I could show them off to my friends. I always knew when to keep my mouth shut, otherwise, my parents would be in trouble at work. And I promised myself that if I was still single and without kids by the age of 30, I'd join the resistance movement. I don't feel safe, and that damn Putin are two phrases I've heard my mum cry out more than once. And now, with Ukraine's destiny unclear, those living next to Russia are terrified. As Russian writer Viktor Yerofeyev, who fled to Germany following Putin's invasion in 2022, once said, "I've been petrified of Russia all my life." The Baltic nations, too, have grounds to be fearful that their big neighbor will force its Russian values upon them. Sir Richard Shurov, who served as NATO's Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Europe, told The Sun he was scared for the future if we don't step up to the mark now and create an effective deterrence. By Rachel Bunyan, Assistant Foreign Editor. Former NATO commanders have warned Putin will repeat the worst of Ukraine horrors if he invades the Baltics. They have warned NATO must mobilize and prepare for war, so Putin has no doubt that if his men step foot in the Baltics, he will get a bloody nose and be stopped. That will mean Europe and their Canadian allies must stand on their own 2 feet, without relying on the $4 billion US military that has been underpinning NATO's security for 76 years. Sir Richard Shurov, who served as NATO's Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Europe, told The Sun he was scared for our future if we don't step up to the mark now and create an effective deterrence. The former commander, who led British troops in the First Gulf War and Iraq, warned that if Putin gets what he wants in Ukraine through a Trump-brokered deal, it will effectively see the capitulation of the nation. That gives Putin the opportunity to declare victory and to rearm, regenerate, and rebuild his armed forces, Sir Shurov said. And then when he's done that, he will finish off Ukraine. Because he's never going to give up on his aim of taking over the whole of Ukraine either. Next, Sir Shurov warns, Putin will move into Moldova, Georgia, and Romania by interfering in their elections and putting one of his puppets in power. Then he'll set his sights on the Baltics. The former military chief warns, "I think it's highly likely that when he looks at NATO, he'll think it's a busted flush because of what Trump has done, and then he'll think, I'll have a go on the Baltics. And then we're at war with Russia because we've got 1,000 soldiers in Estonia, and so do the French, Germans, Canadians in the Baltics." The former commander, who led British troops in the First Gulf War and Iraq, warned that if Putin gets what he wants in Ukraine through a Trump-brokered deal, it will effectively see the capitulation of the nation. That gives Putin the opportunity to declare victory and to rearm, regenerate, and rebuild his armed forces, Sir Shuref said. And then when he's done that, he will finish off Ukraine. Next, Sir Shuref warned that Putin would move into Moldova, Georgia, and Romania by interfering in their elections and putting one of his puppets in power. And then he'll set his sights on the Baltics, including my home, where I spent the first 19 years of my life. Not long ago, after the war started, the Latvian Ministry of Defense, as well as President Rinkevics, urged its citizens to prepare a 72-hour emergency bag packed with all the essentials, including clothing, food, and first aid kit. Those who also have access to a cellar were told to clear it out if there is to be a bombing. As well as having protests outside the Russian embassy in Riga, the citizens of the capital, 616K in total, can also attend regular training where they're instructed on the necessary steps to take in case of an attack. Where to and what now is something my family think about a lot. They don't want to spend the rest of their life in constant fear. They don't want the evil tyrant and Russia to win, see them flee, and forcefully take what they've worked so hard for. We're fortunate enough that my dad has a house in Australia, and we have the opportunity to start a life down under, away from it all and in safety. I recently proposed this to my parents and youngest brother, 22, who still lives back home, but they're unwilling. They don't want to spend the rest of their life in constant fear. They don't want the evil tyrant and Russia to win, see them flee, and forcefully take what they've worked so hard for. Meanwhile, I'm here in London with my other brother, 26, and somehow there's this sense of guilt that I've left them alone. My real emotions and what truly goes on inside me is something I rarely show. But now, for the first time in years, I am scared. I don't know how many gorgeous and green Latvian summers I will get to experience, or how many times we'll all sit around the Christmas tree in our flat. Cycling to the nearby beach, mushroom foraging with my family, singing along 20,000 other people at the Latvian Song and Dance Festival. It could all soon become just memories.